I didn't expect any of that, but.
No, we're so glad to have you.
Well,
Take your time to do this.
thank you. So there's a lot more official courses that you can actually take, but the National Association of Realtors used to have or the Virginia Realtors used to have a class called Professional Standards that everybody would usually take, and for some reason they knocked it out, and I don't really know why. It's kind of, I know.
It's like the roadshow thing, right?
Yeah, the roadshow, exactly. And so they used to have a roadshow, and it was an extended 8-hour, day of class with a bunch of case studies, and they would have you practice being on a grievance committee and all that kind of thing. Anyway, so they knocked that out, and I don't know why, but I think since then we've seen ethics complaints go up, and that's not a good thing. So a couple of things that you need to know about the Code of Ethics is that realtors are licensees, but licensees are not always realtors. So in our association, everybody is a realtor. It's a requirement with our association to be a realtor member. In other associations across the state, there are some associations, particularly Virginia Beach, they don't require you to be a realtor. You can just be a licensee. In those areas, the Code of Ethics, if you're not a realtor member, the Code of Ethics doesn't apply to you. So it's a really good thing to be able to say that you're a realtor to your clients because you're held to a higher standard. So licensees do have to still, they're of course held to the standard of license law, which is not nearly as strict as the Code of Ethics. So everybody should have a copy of the Code of Ethics in front of them. It's an 8-pager. It's a pretty dry read, but I would encourage you every once in a while, just pull it out and pick an article and read it. Some of them are relevant to what we do every day. Some of them are so uncommon, they probably would never happen. And what I want to do is get the real boring one out of the way most quickly, which is Article 17. So Article 17 is discussing if you are charged with an ethics violation, if somebody complains on you, then you have to cooperate. And so you're required to, hold on a second here. So you're required to mediate or arbitrate. You can't just, say, no, I'm not doing it and I'm not listening to this. You have to cooperate. So that's like the most common sense,
If someone has a complaint, what is the steps?
Okay.
So say you had a complaint against another realtor.
Okay.
What would you do?
So anybody can file a complaint against a realtor member. Doesn't have to be a member of the public or another realtor. It can be anybody. I mean, I guess those are the only two options. but anybody can file. They just need to know what they're doing. So let's say, for example, a member of the public thought that you did something wrong and they wanted to file a complaint on you, but they don't even know where to start. So what that member of the public does is they go to James, because he's an ombudsman. So James is an ombudsman, and what he does is he will sit down with a member of the public and say, tell me your story, tell me your complaint, and he will help them find which article and standard of practice within the Code of Ethics has been violated if that story on its face were true. So then he will help them fill out the form correctly. Every association has an ombudsman assigned to them. So at that point, the case would then be filed with the local association. That association would handle the complaint by sending it to what's called the grievance committee. The grievance committee is very much like a grand jury. They don't render any verdicts. They don't make any decisions. They just say, if the facts of this case are true on their face, is there a potential violation here? And so it's kind of like a grand jury. Is there enough evidence for an indictment? Well, the grievance committee, that's what they do. Is there enough information here to show that there's possibly a violation of the Code of Ethics? If the grievance committee says yes, there is, then it gets passed on to the professional standards committee. Then a professional standards committee will have a hearing where all parties will be given the opportunity to present their case, present their defense. Each member can be represented by an attorney if they choose to be. But a lot of times people just come and tell their story, and that's all there is to it. At that point, the professional standards committee will hear the case and then make a decision and rule on whether there was an actual violation of the code of ethics or not. If there's a violation of the code of ethics found, then the professional standards committee decides what happens at that point. And a lot of times it's extra education. A lot of times it's a fine. Pretty rarely would it be a suspension of, license or membership. Now, that being said, an association can't suspend somebody's license, but they can suspend their membership, okay, from the association. So the code of ethics is broken down into 3 sections. And the first one is Articles 1 through 9. And those are duties to clients and customers. So that's basically, if you're working with somebody in a transaction or seeking business in a transaction, then Articles 1 through 9 apply. Articles 10 through 14 are duties to the public. They're more like advertising and that kind of stuff. Articles 15 through 17 are duties to each other, duties to Realtor members. So we owe each other some common courtesies, and it's amazing how often those are violated, which is sad. But so what is really cool about the code of ethics is there's not much cool about it, but there's there's a couple of little things in it that people don't even know. And agents with tons of experience don't even know that there are some things in here that give you rights to seek business in ways that are ethical, but give you an upper hand or give you an advantage. So we'll get to those and I'll point them out specifically. But it's very dry to go through the code of ethics, so I'm just kind of gonna zip through. But Article 1 in particular is the overwhelming theme of Article 1 is to protect and promote your client's best interests, but still be honest with all parties. So an example of something like that would be like submitting all offers objectively and as quickly as possible, but also treating, like, let's say James brought me an offer on my listing. James, is going to tell me the story about his clients and why they love the house so much. But I also have written my own offer on my own listing, and I really want, of course, to, my sellers to accept my offer. But I'm still going to present the offer objectively that James brought. Even though it's in my buyer client's best interest to sell my client's offer, I still have to present it objectively, and I still have to be fair and be honest with all parties. So like another example of that is if somebody calls you to show a property and you know that something is going to be constructed down the road that is going to affect the traffic in that area, and that buyer client is saying, oh, I've got kids and I love this street because it's so quiet. Well, if you know that a street that something is going to happen that's going to change the traffic, it's not necessarily in your client's best interest, to your seller client's best interest, to disclose that. And is it a requirement? No. But is it an honest and right thing to do? Probably. So I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in the code of ethics that's like, do you or don't you, and is subject to, and that's why you have hearing panels to determine, did you go too far or did you not? So if you had knowledge that this construction project was going to create a bunch of traffic when the little kids are riding their bikes, you probably should tell them even though you don't represent them. That's honest. Okay. Go ahead. Did you say something, Amy?
Oh, no.
Oh, I thought you said something. Okay. So standards of practice. All right, so here's an interesting thing that comes up a lot of times. And I know, actually, I know you have been questioned about this with presenting all offers in a timely manner, right? As quickly as possible. So this happens, in this market right now. Here we are with multiple offers, and a lot of us are holding offers and presenting them all at the same time. So that's okay as long as you're disclosing it. Does it violate the standard of practice 1-6 that you have to present all offers as quickly as possible? I don't know. Does it? What do you all think? Yeah. Yeah. In consultation with your seller, if your seller says, I don't want to see any offers until I see all of them at the same time. So you just have to consult with your seller. What's your take, Amy?
Exactly that. The seller says, so I also don't have a problem with the seller saying, okay, we're gonna have probably multiple offers over this weekend. I'm just gonna shoot them to you as they come in, and I'll call you Sunday at 5 o'clock and we'll go over it all again.
Yeah. All right. So let's say an agent then brings you an offer with an expiration date or with a response deadline of Saturday at 5 p.m. Then what?
The seller can say, they put this in here. You can respond, you can not respond. Are they not gonna buy the house if you wait until tomorrow at 5 o'clock? And then let the seller decide what they wanna do.
Yeah.
If the seller looks at it and says, this is the best offer I've ever seen, and I wanna sign it, they can sign it. They don't have to wait till 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Even though you've already told everyone else, we're waiting until, I know, because I had a seller counter offer last week, and then that was like at 3 o'clock, buyer accepted verbally,
Mhm.
but we hadn't had it signed yet, and then another offer came in, like at 6 o'clock.
Mhm.
Well, of course, buyer's agent 1 is furious at me, and I'm like, I'm sorry. He's like, well, your seller's gonna honor his word. I'm like, it's up to the seller. I'm like, seller's gonna make the decision, and he took the second offer because it was better.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I have gotten where on the top of each offer, if they don't accept it, I just make a little notation that says offer considered but not accepted.
Mhm.
Have the seller sign it and send it back.
Mhm.
So there's no question, we did look at your offer.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times you hear, I wonder if they even saw our offer.
Mhm.
That way that puts that doubt out of the way. But I mean, it's up to the seller.
Yeah. Yeah. So the safest bet, if you have a listing in that situation where you expect multiple offers, the safest thing is to just go ahead and disclose in the MLS after you've discussed with your seller. Disclose that you're going to present all offers at a certain time so that nobody can come back to you and say, you didn't present my offer in a timely manner, or file a complaint on you for that. So, any other thoughts?
I missed something
Okay.
there. Because you said you make it so everybody has to present their offer at a certain time, but then the seller has the right, if that one specimen comes along, to take it, and they take it before the deadline, that's not right, is it?
It sure is. If the seller wants to.
Other, agents to say, like, we have one that we're gonna be work, so they can submit it earlier and they have an opportunity. Because then you are kind of.
It's what the seller wants. But the seller can tell you to call the others, you don't have to. The seller can say, I just love this one.
But should we suggest it? Because then you're helping them get more money potentially,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Under advice and counsel.
How truthful is that statement? We're not gonna look at any offers at 5 o'clock on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
At 2 o'clock on Sunday, you get an offer that she takes.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the wording, you don't plan to. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's tricky.
It is tricky.
And even holding them, if someone submitted their offer on Sunday and they're holding it until Wednesday, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on how you be ethical with everyone's in that situation.
Yeah, the only thing you can do is just put it out there and say, this is what's happening. I mean, on my 200 Lucas listing, I got an offer at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, and my seller didn't want to look at offers until last night. He wanted to give everybody time to look at the house and have for the open house to happen. And that agent who sent me the offer at 11 on Saturday, she said, you have to present this. And I said, my sellers instructed me that they don't want to see anything. They want to consider them all equally at the same time. And she wasn't happy with that. But yeah,
One important point is whenever you do that or anything, honestly, anything, get it in writing. Put it in an email, put it in a text message, because if you do have ethics violations or come against you, a phone call, you can't go back to a phone call to prove that you did that. So if you have it in a text message or an email, you have evidence that you did it the correct way, and that'll kill it pretty quickly. Otherwise, it's up to the panel to make a decision based on the two sides.
mm-hmm.
Get it in writing.
Agreed.
Generally go with the public.
No,
Oh, no.
they know about what's right, or the ethics rules, etc.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I've sat on a couple of professional standards panels, hearing panels, and the cases were really interesting. And you'd be amazed at how it was a failure of the member of the public to file the complaint incorrectly. They filed it incorrectly. They cited the wrong standard of practice. And because they cited the wrong standard of practice, the hearing panel could not find them guilty. We individually discussed that we found 4 other violations that should have been cited based on the whole story we heard, but nobody ever cited them. So, yeah, it was just, so it's super important to make sure that you're filling out the complaint form correctly.
How often do you get those a year, like on average?
So our association is really slim. And it's because we're very close to each other. We all know each other, so people very rarely file complaints. Our association actually is getting ready to join a co-op, a consortium of sorts, which basically we're not going to handle local ethics complaints at a local level. We used to have that in place, a grievance panel and a professional standards committee, but it's impossible to field an impartial panel around here because we all know each other. So in that situation, the best thing to do is, if we get a local complaint, it automatically gets sent to the Virginia Realtors, and Virginia Realtors will handle it and, vet it and send it out to another local to have a hearing at another local. So, yeah.
One was a homeowner in the recession who was absolutely upset that there was no house upside down because it was the recession. And the termite inspector lost the key from the lockbox. And the lockbox reported the last entry, which was the termite inspector. And when the buyer agent went to do a walkthrough, the key wasn't in there. And at this point, the house was vacant, where people moved out. So I had to call the owner to get the code for the garage. So the key's not in the lockbox. Well, they took an absolute tizzy that I had put them at risk. It was my fault the key was not in the lockbox, and I had put them at risk, and they cited something in here about protecting their property and filed a complaint. But it went to the grievance committee, and the grievance committee looked at everything and said, well, that's not Amy's fault, the key's not in the lockbox. We know the last person who took in the box was the termite inspector. It's not Amy's job to put the key back in the box after the termite inspector was there. And so grievance dismissed it. And then I had another one that had to do with my name after I got remarried, and that one they sent up to the state. Someone didn't understand that you can mark it under one name in your license doing business as, and still have a different legal name. And so that one they sent to the state VAR.
You bet.
Because it wasn't any violation.
Yeah, grievance said there's not enough. There's nothing here. Yeah.
What a pain though.
Yeah.
It's distracting.
It is, because you
Yeah.
actually have to write.
Yeah.
A response.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to write a response back to them. And then,
Yeah.
it took a little time.
Yeah. So directly in relation to what she's talking about, standards of practice 1-10 and 1-11, they charge us with competently managing property and protecting the property and people in it. So that's probably the exact standard of practice that they were citing you with. So, but this is one of the reasons that we have recently changed to requiring lockboxes or enforcing the requirement for lockboxes. An agent at Long and Foster had a manual lockbox on his listing, and the homeowner came home, the lockbox was still left on the manual code, and like, what good does that do? That's not security in any way, shape, or form. And then a few days later, that same agent, same listing, same house, using a manual lockbox, the key was still in the door and the manual lockbox was just sitting wide open when they came home. It's like, what in the world, No, did not. But the agent was freaking out, feeling like, so, this is exactly why we are enforcing the requirement for lockboxes, for system lockboxes, because you can read who goes in it. Manual lockbox, you have no idea who's gone in it. And, Peg, you could give your client the code. Oh, I'm going to be 15 minutes late. The code's blah, blah, blah. I'll be there in 15 minutes. What? No. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And also, a little side note on my inspector and key. So one thing that the public does not understand with the ethics violations is they think they can go after your commission on that. That one, they said in their complaint that you should forego all of the commission. They should have commission back. They don't understand that that's not what it is. It's not court.
Yeah, Marshall's like, oh.
If you're found in violation, it's not that you have to give up your commission, which you may be fined by the association, or you may be forced to take education by the association, but it's not your commission.
And even if you're fine, the complainant doesn't get that.
Yeah, good. That's a good point. The complainant does not receive
Compensation.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. You may want to mention too, you can't be filed a complaint on standard practice. Just the article. Mention that. So you can't, if someone files an ethics violation against you, they don't file on the standard of practice. The standard of practices are just kind of to give you an idea of what some meat of what these articles mean. You only can file that ethics complaint on the article, based on the articles in the code of ethics.
So yeah, that's a good point.
Like they can't say broadly you violated the code of ethics. They actually have to point it out as to what you did.
They do, and they have to find the article that it fits in, and then it's up to the panel to find the standard of practice that says, yeah, what it is. So another thing about filing ethics complaints is they have to be filed within 180 days of the violation or your knowledge of the violation. Okay. So if it's, and that's one of the questions that the grievance panel will ask, was this timely filed? And if it was filed on day 181, too bad. Okay, standard practice 115, you must disclose the existence of other offers. And if asked, this is something that a lot of us don't know, but this can really benefit you to know this. So you must disclose the existence of other offers unless, as long as your seller has authorized that. There's a place in the listing agreement that, says I authorize that if we have other offers, to disclose it. So you must disclose them, and if asked, you have to disclose where the offer came from, where the other offers came from. So, for example, let's just say an agent from Nest Realty brought me an offer and on my listing, and I said, thank you for your offer. I already got 3 offers on the property. We're gonna, consider all offers at the same time on X date. And then that agent from Nest can say, okay, well, where did all the offers come from? Did you write any of your offers? Are they from agents within your firm? And I have to answer that question. I can't refuse to answer that question. I have to answer it. And that benefits you because when you're in a competing situation, it can tell you if you're competing with agents in the office who definitely are gonna, the broker is going to be more inclined to commission, re-agreements if it's their own offer or if it's an offer within their office so they can get double sides, right? So you still have to disclose variable commission arrangements, but when they happen in the heat of the moment, they don't really get disclosed. But let me give you an example. So I wrote an offer on a listing for Nest. The Nest agent said she had had an open house that day. And she said, I already have an offer in hand. And I said, okay, did you bring that offer? And she said, what do you mean? I don't do dual agency. And I said, I'm not asking if you're doing dual agency. I asked you if you wrote the offer. And she said, I am extremely offended and I cannot believe that I will present both offers fairly and objectively. And I said, you have got to answer the question. And she said, I'm not going to answer that question. And I was like, okay, I mean, I can file a code of ethics complaint on you if you don't answer that question. And she said, well, what difference does that make to you? And I said, well, it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference because if you've got variable commission, if you've got, in-house deals going on, I mean, it makes a big difference. And she was just very upset with me. So I ended up talking to Jeremy, the broker, and he explained to her that this is within my rights to ask this, and she was required to answer it. And I could have filed an ethics complaint on her, but why didn't I? Because, we all work together and we all have to
Yeah, but
continue working
that
together.
whole thing of we don't do dual agency, I'm sorry, you're in the same locker room.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all you're doing is saying, hey, here, the second agent, be me.
Right.
And write this.
And not only that, but you don't have to do dual agency to write an offer on your own property.
Right.
It can be an unrepresented buyer. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be a dual agent. So anyway. Yep.
You can ask the other agent, are there any other offers? The other agent is authorized by the seller to say yes. Once the other agent has said yes, then there are two other questions you can ask. And the two other questions are the other offers from your firm? Or did you personally write these offers?
Right.
So that's what you can ask, and they have to answer those.
Yep. Exactly. So that will tell you a lot about what kind of offer you need to bring if you know you're competing with an in-house agent. Okay.
Thank you, question. So can the seller advise you as the realtor not to say that there's multiple offers?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if she tells you, don't tell all the agents involved.
Mhm.
You don't have to.
So then the question is you call me and say, Amy, I have to be.
Oh,
I am not at liberty to disclose that information. And that would be safe.
There's an assumption that they're all.
Mhm.
But you can't win that. So if the seller says, don't disclose it, and you can ask that question, the seller has authorized me not to tell you if they're multiple.
That's across the board, whether there are on.
Yeah, but it's,
Yeah,
you know, if you don't answer, the automatic assumption is, oh, it must be.
Exactly.
So, but I don't know, is that in the seller's best interest? Is that maybe, it could be an escalation clause, or aggressive offer.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it could be in your seller's best interest to say, I'm not at liberty to disclose that.
And then
Or
you
like, say it. You look at here. If there isn't another offer, if you say, well, I'm not at liberty to disclose, then that makes sense, like, put it in really good offer. Or not try it on.
Yeah, well, you said-
Yeah, they could go totally different.
This is kind of backfiring, do I go around?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what they're.
That's literally what happened on 200 Lucas is 3 different agents came back to me and said, my guys have decided not to make an offer. They don't want to compete.
We don't want it that bad, we want to.
So in that case, that's not to your seller's advantage to disclose that there's multiple offers, but you have to have that discussion with your seller as to what are the pros and cons. And 90% of the time it's a pro to disclose that there's multiple offers, but yeah. Okay, moving on. So Article 2 has to do with disclosing material facts about properties, again, being honest. And you have to, avoiding exaggeration and not, when you're writing things in your listing descriptions, not saying things that are a clear exaggeration and, the best property in the whole street, no, don't do that, And also your responsibility as a buyer agent is not to discover things that contractors know, but you don't know. If it's out of your area of expertise, you don't need to, it's not incumbent on you to crawl in the crawl space and try to figure out if there's a leak in the crawl space. But it is incumbent on you if it's reasonably apparent that there's a material defect. If you walk into a basement and you see a puddle of water and a bunch of mold, what you think might be mold, then it's incumbent on you to say, this is questionable. I'm not a contractor. I don't know exactly what it is, but, or when you walk into, a house and you see, all right, so this is exactly what.
In real estate.
All right.
And I've been doing this pretty much all my adult life. I think the duty of disclosure can be the most challenging. Not because I don't like to be transparent. I'm very transparent. I'm probably too transparent. But I don't always know what's a material fact and what isn't. I'm not always sure what I'm supposed to know. Now, if somebody says to me, here's some information about the property, I might go, oh, well, that needs to be shared. But is that something I should have unearthed on my own? So let's talk about what Article 2 says. It says we're to avoid exaggeration, misrepresentation, and concealment of pertinent facts. Now, this is what we learn in pre-licensing. However, and we don't talk about this part, and we should, there's no obligation to disclose latent defects or things outside the scope of our real estate license. In other words, I'm not your CPA. I'm not the roof inspector. I'm not your attorney. Now, this isn't my first rodeo, so if I am looking at a house and I see spots on the ceiling of the second floor bedroom, I'm going to go into the attic area and see if there appears to be signs of water intrusion. That's what they call it now, water intrusion. And then I would disclose that. Leaky roof, leaky roof. But if there's a rotten bandsill over in the far corner of the foundation, kind of where the snake lives, I'm probably not going underneath and crawling on my belly, poking my pencil in to see if there are rotten bandsills. That's probably beyond my real estate license.
All right, so the general feel is what? Yes, right, stay in your lane, but if it's reasonably apparent if you've seen it before, if you know what it is, then it does become part of your responsibility.
I'll work with the agent who's also a licensed contractor.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's true.
And then brings you.
That's a good question. That is a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. What is your take on that?
And they bring you the addendum of repairs prior to the home inspection?
Mm-hmm.
That just happened to me.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because, it does happen. There's licensed contractors that are agents.
I don't think that would be allowed, because it's just like an attorney. Like, you can't act, even if you're licensed as an attorney, you can't act as an attorney if you just have a representation agreement for real estate agency. I think it falls under the same.
If you are hired to do this job and this is what you're doing, and you're acting under that license, to do that job.
The knowledge is still there, like you can't cut your knowledge.
Yeah, but you shouldn't put it in an addendum of repairs. You can put it, they tell the seller or whomever,
Mm-hmm.
the seller, hey, these are probably things that are gonna come up in the home inspection, and then wait for them to come up in the home inspection.
Yeah.
Because what if they don't? And your seller sinks a bunch of money into it. Well, did you really just act in your seller's best interest? No,
Right.
especially if they paid you as the contractor to do it.
Yeah. Well, all right, so another example of staying in your lane is, how often does somebody ask you, okay, I can deduct this on my taxes, right? And, in general, they probably can, or they're exempt from, a certain amount of gains.
or- yeah.
Thank you. You know that, but it's not your job. You're not a CPA, and you don't know their full tax situation. So, you could just say something like, "That's my understanding, but I recommend that you consult with a tax advisor." Simple as that. Yeah.
How would you address this? Got a lot of new agents here, go in and get a listing agreement signed, and they're thinking, I know there's some things wrong with this house probably, he doesn't tell me, and, they kind of beat around the bush and let the seller know that basically I don't want to know some of these things about the house.
That's purely irresponsible. That's purely irresponsible. I mean, when you're representing a property, it just, you have to ask the seller, and if the seller doesn't tell you, that's not your problem. That's not your fault. But if you know it, if you see it, and your seller lies to you, you still know it, and you still have a duty to disclose it. If you're not an expert and you can't tell, then talk to your broker. That's the best thing I could say. But so much of this is like, what feels right to you, and how would you feel if somebody did it to your parents or your kid? It's just, it's a good question though,
I
because
heard Amy say before that if if your seller client's asking you to do something unethical, then just, you don't do that. If that's what they're looking for, then they can walk away from you as an agent. You can walk away from them as an agent.
Yeah.
But don't give in to your sellers doing unethical stuff.
Yeah. No way.
If you see it, but they didn't tell you about it, then you ask them about it.
And they just straight up lie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then, at that point, you have to ask, is this worth my license to continue
Yeah.
with this person?
Well, because you have to, if they say, I've got a leaky roof, but I don't want you to say anything about it.
You can't do that.
I'm sorry, I can't say anything. I cannot not do that.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
As if you're representing the buyers, two contracts have fallen apart on the same property previously, so you bring the third offer, well aware that there are issues. So this buyer that you're representing comes in with, and the seller has refused to, although we know it's the property of the person who purchased the inspection is blah, blah, blah. We question some of the issues that are pretty obvious within the house. But they keep saying, no, there's nothing wrong with it. Seller says there's nothing wrong with the house. They didn't have the issues when he lived there for 7 years. But so your buyer comes in with, like an inspector on steroids, not your standard inspection, twice as much as a normal inspection, because he's a licensed engineer and is really digging deeper because people want to know what they're looking into. Okay, he comes back with some pretty significant issues with the house. I mean, it really was a ridiculous report, but issues such as major foundation and water issues that will have to be addressed, but also major issues with the deck that the seller claims they just put $10,000 into. But the deck is, according to this engineer, falling downhill. Okay, what does the listing agent then have to do with that? Because he's standing back and saying, this is asinine, I've never seen anything like this in my life. Who do we trust, and what information are they required to reveal at that point? Chew on that one for a little while.
Yeah, because that's, just because one contractor says something's wrong or an engineer says something's wrong, doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong.
Right, sure.
I mean, Virginia is a buyer beware state, and this is getting into license stuff, but Virginia is a buyer beware state. So, the listing agent should just say house sold as is. If they don't want to do repairs, the listing agent should just say house sold as is.
And they don't let anybody do it. They say no, all it has to then have to. Well, that could potentially be a big ticket item.
Yeah.
Fire, run.
Yeah. Listing agent, fire that seller.
Yeah.
I think the list. I think the listing agent should fire that seller, personally.
He's telling us to fire our buyers. I think we should take it together.
I love it how everybody's got an opinion. So, all right, Article 3. All right, this is this is the best. To me, people don't know this at all, and Amy battles this all the time because she gets agents out of the area coming down. So, Article 3, you have to cooperate with other agents. No matter what part of the state they're from, if they're from another state, you have to cooperate with them, but you don't have to compensate them. The only time you have to compensate them is if they're in your MLS. All right, so let's say that Joe Schmo from ABC Realty in Northern Virginia comes down and says, oh, I don't have access to your lock boxes, but, can you let me show this property? Sure, no problem. It's on Joe Schmo to ask you, will you compensate me if I bring you an offer? And if he didn't ask you that, you don't have to compensate him. He can bring you an offer all day long.
Should you get that in writing?
Yes.
So in a situation like that with property down towards Carroll County that's being listed out of Mount Airy.
See, I'm getting ready to get into the same situation with one that's listed in Roanoke, but
I
my
don't know if
buyer's
there's a form we should ask.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Is there like a standard form, or can we just like put it in an email? Or-
Just put it, if you put it in an email, and this is really, I wish Amy could answer this question. Where is she? But like, how does she want it done? I think is the question. Yeah, but essentially, like what I do is I just do an email. But now that being said, our broker is a member of the MLS in Roanoke and is a member of the Southwest MLS. So because she's a member,
This is a triad.
yeah, so I don't know if because she's a broker and she's in the MLS,
I don't know that it would cover, I don't know, it's like an umbrella.
is it all her agents because she's the broker?
Individually, because don't we all each would have to pay for a membership?
Just like we have to
I could be
here.
wrong, I could be completely wrong, but it just makes
Because
sense to me that
compensation
that's
is made to
a-
brokers though. It's not made to
That's
individual
true.
agents.
That's true.
Amy! Mommy! So anyway, another thing about this is you can't make your offer, the terms of an offer or the submission of an offer subject to being offered compensation. So recently we had a situation where an agent went to another agent, showed up the property, and the listing agent called him for feedback. The buyer agent said, I noticed that you're only paying $2 or 2% in the MLS. I noticed that you're only offering 2%. So I'll bring you an offer if you'll pay me 3. You can't do that. You cannot do that. So first of all, you can't walk into a property. When you walk into a property with an MLS sheet that says it's going to pay you 2.5 for an offer, you can't go and change that compensation. You are saying that you accept 2.5 the second you open that door, because that's what the MLS is offering you. All right. So if you are an out of area agent though, and you're not a member of the MLS and you haven't seen that offer of compensation and you open the door because they gave you a 1-day code, you're not guaranteed any compensation whatsoever.
Same thing as like before it goes in the MLS, right? Because I've heard of like one of my friends bought a house. He was showed it by the listing agent, but then decided to use another agent to represent him.
Mm-hmm.
And the listing agent got pissed and only paid him like 0.5% or something. This was before I met. This was before I met the kid that bought the house. But yeah, he said that his agent, his buyer's agent, got screwed. There was some big name agents around here that did it too. That happened with. But yeah, since it wasn't the MLS yet, they're like, nah, we're paying you like 0.5%.
That's right, it wasn't in the
And then,
MLS.
yeah, because it was like coming soon, or is that why?
Yeah, well, the listing agent tried to sell himself, showed it to him ahead of time. He's like, and then he's like, well, I'm gonna have somebody else with you. He's like, okay. We'll see what I think of that kind of situation.
If you read Standard of Practice 3-1, clearly says, realtors acting as exclusive agents of or brokers of sellers and landlords establish the terms and conditions of offers to cooperate. Unless expressly indicated in offers to cooperate, cooperating brokers, which are buyer agents, may not assume that the offer of cooperation includes an offer of compensation.
But you can put that in the contract, right?
No, no. The contract is between the parties. The contract is between the two principals. Commission has zero to do with agreement between buyer and seller.
I had a
But you
road
can get it from your buyer.
I had a road agent write it on a contract that I got.
It's, and they'll do it all day long. It's wrong.
It's not enforced.
Well, now I'm convinced.
It happens all the time. Amy got an offer from a Northern Virginia agent who never stepped foot in the River Valley. She paid somebody $25 to open a door. Somebody $25 with an MLS key to open a door. Paid him $25 and then wrote an offer to Amy. Never stepped foot in the property. Does not have expertise in this area. Not a member of our MLS, and wrote in the contract that they were to be paid a commission. And Amy said,
Did you really?
yeah.
Good for you.
She's not part of our MLS, she was not entitled to the commission, and you don't put your commission on the contract, your commission cannot be, the contract cannot be a condition to getting a commission.
So did you send it back before you gave it to the sellers and had her remove that?
You just need to have a separate agreement. So, yeah.
How are you supposed to get it agreed to? Like say I went to Roanoke, I'm a member of Roanoke.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's say I'm an MLS. How do I get it agreed to?
You send the commission agreement first. So you send
Oh,
the
okay,
commission agreement
so there is,
first,
okay.
and the seller would sign
So
the
that's
commission
what
agreement.
my main question was. In that situation, because I'm gonna wanna do something like that before I go and show the house tomorrow.
For that instance, an email, as long as Amy says will, an email is fine. As long as you have it in writing that they're willing to offer a conversation to you.
See, I do write it in on for sale by owners, because I want them to, like, on the contract, because I'm not working with another agent.
Like for me, before
I'm
I
just
go to
working with the for sale by owner.
Mm-hmm.
So on those contracts, I put that RE/MAX will be paid X dollars at settlement by the seller.
But that contract is an agreement between buyer and seller. It's not an agreement
I know.
between RE/MAX 8 and the
But
seller.
the sale by owner doesn't know that.
They don't, and
I
they
just
and they
looking to get
adhere to
paid.
it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But why not just do a one-time show agreement
Yeah.
between you and the FSBO?
And the FSBO, right, exactly, and then take it off the table, yeah.
So, and so the buyer just is completely out of that whole,
Yeah,
know.
yeah, that makes better sense.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, with that, like with a one-time show agreement, I'm gonna want to do.
Rachel, you want me to take over and bring this back in?
Thanks, Austin.
I got you.
You can deal with that agent who's not paying you, man.
No,
Right.
I would say yes, the broker paying the broker, so if you went there and then the other agent was willing to let you write that contract, or you individual or not a member, but I am, and the other agent's happy to work with you, I don't see why not. Because it's the broker to broker.
Okay.
Now, the problem we have is using the NLS illegally. That's the problem. So you're not really you're an NLS person, but you want to list a property in Salem, and so you say, Amy, and you put this in the NLS in your name, even though it was really yours to begin with. The NLS has an issue with that.
Yeah. That's outside the code of ethics, though.
I can't do it for you. That's totally has to do with NLS because NLS is a private business backer. And it is different from the realtor association. Realtor association is your association, is your non-profit. The NLS is a for-profit business, it's a separate corporation, and it has a separate. What about co-lister? Technically not supposed to do it as a co-lister for the purpose of getting it in there. That's like the front of our NLS, I'll tell you when you log in, well, you've always got these things coming up about how non-NLS participants cannot advertise in our NLS. So like if you even if you like co-listed it with someone who's not in our MLS to try to get it in there, that's a violation. Even worse, when agents put up, call Joe from NKB for all questions. Yeah. You know, that's heavily worse, obviously.
I think probably, yeah.
But of course, if you're not a member of the MLS or your show, you would naturally call this agent to ask for agency.
You should ask the agent for the printout, ask the agent if they're willing to pay you a commission on the designer, and how am I getting in? So the other agent will have to figure out how to let you in, which makes listing agents very unhappy that they would have to drive around on Saturday or working because you don't have a lockbox.
Well, right now, last contract was listed in Southwest Virginia, MLS, but of course, they know that you're going to have a lot of NRP agents showing the house. So it's a combination.
So, all right, so you sold one of your listings to a Northern Virginia agent. How did he get paid?
Yeah, I sold 2 this year, one to a Virginia agent, one to a Virginia Beach agent for local properties. Both of them did the right thing and they asked up front if we would offer compensation to them. And when they do that, I mean, I tend to agree to it. You know, at that point, as long as they do it appropriately, ask up front in writing, typically that we're willing to offer. Now, the one thing I've had to battle with them on is they say, oh, well, you know, can you go let them in when they come to look at it this time?
Can you let the home inspector in? Can you let the termite
Yeah,
guy?
and we almost did it, actually put it ready. One agent said, I'm happy to do that, man, but guess what? The commission will be adjusted. And I told him, I said, I'm happy to do that, but the listing commission will then be 3.5 and yours will be 2.5 because I'm doing half of your job, letting these people in the house. And he said, I'm agreeable to that, and then he found another way to get them back. So we didn't end up doing it, but, and that's fair. I mean, if, you know, I'm happy to do that for someone, but we're gonna appropriately adjust things to where I'll be compensated for my time to do half of your job too.
So interestingly, that leads us into Article 11, which is the basic premise of Article 11 is stick to what you know. Don't try to be working on properties that you know nothing about. Don't try to do property management when you have Michelle Extraordinaire. You don't know property management. You don't know the Northern Virginia market. Unless you're having somebody help you with that market, you're supposed to be an expert in your area. Particularly, it says realtors shall not undertake to provide specialized professional services concerning a type of property that's outside their field of competence, unless they engage the assistance of one who is competent. So essentially, these agents who are coming from Northern Virginia or Virginia Beach, they don't know this market and they're not doing their buyers any favors. So, you know, then they ask James, hey, can you send me your comps? It's not my job to send you my comps, you know?
A great example of what she's talking about is he actually brought the contract on their local contract, the RAIN contract is the name of their MLS, where he's from. And in the RAIN contract, they do termite inspections, but in the same section, they do moisture inspections as well, because in that market, it's a problem. And they actually have the same guy that does their termite inspections does these moisture inspections. So he submitted the contract and we crossed all this crap out on the contract, but we don't do that in our market. And when I sent it back to him, he's like, that's insane. Why you cross this out? I said, it's not a common market practice here for this to be done. My seller's not going to agree to it because this is our market, not your market. So that's, what's that?
You could have written it back and given the counter offer on our contract. We don't have to.
You could, yeah.
Yeah.
You could submit it back, yeah.
That's probably what I would have done, because that way I can look at my seller and say, this is the one I'm familiar with. I don't know all the fine print in that one. I don't want this one.
Right, and that's why I took it as a learning opportunity. I read the whole thing, of course, just to make sure. And a lot of stuff same, but quite frankly, their contract is better than ours. It is much more comprehensive, and you don't have to add a whole bunch of crap in. It's actually a really nice contract once I read over it. But I mean, I'm not an attorney, but
Yeah.
But as long as you read it, don't just glance over it and present it or write it on.
But really, that buyer's agent shouldn't be trying to come into this market and represent to, he didn't have any assistance from a local agent other than you, right?
Right.
So, I mean, he shouldn't have been dabbling in this market. And really, essentially, if his buyer finds out, 3 months from now that he overpaid for the property, he could file an ethics complaint under this standard of practice, under this article, saying he was practicing out of his area of expertise.
Most times when you see this happen, though, it's not just like a buyer they're working with. It's, oh, my best friend, oh, my brother, oh, my. I mean, it's someone very close. In both instances with mine, one was his best friend growing up, and the other is a close family friend. And they just said, hey, I don't really care what you know about the area. I just want you to represent me in this instance. So that's what you're usually going to find. Not to say you won't find someone just trying to do it, but most of the other time, someone will just send a referral to someone to a local market.
Yeah. Okay, we'll zip through Article 4. Just says you must disclose your ownership interest when you're selling or your realtor status when you're trying to buy. Article 5 is, what did I say here? I didn't write that down right. Article 5 is you may not seek to provide services if you have an interest in that property without disclosing that you have interest in that property. So like, for example, if you're thinking of buying investment property, you can't go on a listing appointment without saying, you know what, I'm actually really interested in this property. So yeah, that can get, you can't. I mean, if you say, I actually have interest in this property, then the seller is now aware that you have a negotiating position in mind. So whatever listing price you would recommend to them might be jaded by, does that make sense?
They can make that because you've disclosed it. They don't have to agree with it.
Right, they don't have to agree with it, but
you
you have to give them, the advantage of understanding that you might be recommending. Right, exactly. Okay, Article 6 is basically RESPA. It just basically says that if you have an affiliated business that makes money off of what you're referring, you have to disclose it. That's what our RESPA disclosure is. Article 7, realtors may not accept compensation from more than one party without informed consent of all the parties. I don't really know how, that's one that I don't know. I can't imagine how that would work. Why would yeah. Same blank look, same here. Huh?
Well, what if it's a for sale by owner? For sale by owner is paying you and your buyer. You have a buyer's agency.
You just have to have informed consent
Okay.
of all the parties.
Okay.
So the buyer understands that you're receiving some offsetting compensation.
Right.
Yep. Okay, Article 8 is no commingling of funds. So the earnest money deposits always get held in a separate account. Anytime you're handling funds for somebody, you can't commingle them with your personal funds.
No PayPal, cannot take PayPal.
Yeah.
I've had people ask.
Yeah.
PayPal, no, PayPal is for personal use only, that's all the state, all VAR.
Yeah.
It's not a business account.
So that's because we allow people to wire their funds, but that goes directly into the escrow account. That's wired directly into the escrow account. Yes.
Previous one, what if compensation being offered is 2%? The buyer's agreement says minimum of 2.5%.
Mm-hmm.
Your buyer agrees to pay the extra half.
Mm-hmm.
You have to reveal that.
It's a good question.
That's what my thought process was. I just wasn't sure how to answer that question. Yeah.
So you're saying, do I then, I mean, if to your buyer, yes, for sure. But
Yeah, you're disclosing to your client, I'm getting paid a little bit over here, and you're gonna pay the rest over here. The seller's not your client.
well, this article says that it has to be disclosed by all parties. You have to have informed consent by all parties if you're receiving compensation from more than one party.
Does it say exactly that word?
Let's see.
consent of your client.
Yeah, without disclosure to all parties. No, the informed consent of the realtor's client or client.
For the client.
Yeah, so only your client has to give consent. But you have to disclose it to everybody, but only your client has to consent. That's how we do it.
And then additional amounts that they pay still has to be written.
Article 7, in a transaction, realtors shall not accept compensation from more than one party, even if permitted by law, without disclosure to all parties and the informed consent of the realtor's client or clients.
So just
Yeah,
putting
you
on the
just have to
settlement
disclose
statement,
it to them, but
that
only
would,
your client has to.
that would suffice, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I guess disclosing it is not permission.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So you're suggesting that at the closing table,
Yeah.
it's disclosed.
Yeah, I mean, I would, I mean, that's in right, I mean, you got the 2% on the one side, you got the 0.5% on the other side, they can see both sides on the
Yeah, you're
other
not
side.
asking permission, you're disclosing, so if they're
Oh,
reading
yeah.
the disclosure.
There you go.
Yeah, they would have no way to stop it.
True. And that'd be the perfect time to tell them.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Well, how does it start their business with your client paying you while you're negotiating the price on their house?
Okay, so then, all right, Article 9. Here's another like weird thing that this was when I told you about the ethics panel I sat on. This was one of the things that they should have been charged with, but they weren't, which was Article 9, which requires that you provide copies of all documents to your clients as soon as they're signed, upon their initialing or signing. So DocuSign does that for you automatically, but if you only bring one copy of your listing agreement to the listing appointment and they sign it and you walk away with it, you have just committed a code of ethics violation. You're supposed to leave them with copies of everything that they sign or initial. So good thing is DocuSign does that for you automatically. Wonderful.
Normally I just say, I'm gonna scan this at the office and send it to you.
And
That's what I tell them. I'll send it to you this evening.
and
Isn't there some sort of like a 24-hour? I feel like I remember being like in class learning, like within 24 hours you have to provide.
that might be license law. That might be license law. Which is different. Yeah. But I leave a blank copy, like an unsigned copy, and then do what you do. So I will say, here's a copy of everything that you've signed. I will send you the signed copy when I get back to the office. So,
You don't have them signed two sets.
no,
One.
no,
But
no,
the
the,
second set has all the info that you agreed to.
It's almost like providing two copies. Well, you send it electronically to them. I mean, you're gonna, yeah, kind of.
Well,
But at
maybe
least
for the
you're-
unsigned ones, are you filling out the unsigned ones? as
Yeah,
well?
you
Like,
are
it's-
filling out the unsigned one. You would have to, wouldn't you?
well, if you're, yeah, you should have your listing agreement pretty much signed, filled in all the way, except for price, if that's what you're going to talk about, and commission, if that's what you're going to talk, but everything else should be pretty much,
In there.
yeah,
And so then you would just
yeah,
have that to review.
yeah, right, yeah. Okay, going right along. Another thing about Article 9 is, so the assumption when you send for electronic signatures, like how many times have you written a contract and said, I'll send it over to you by DocuSign, but you never even made an attempt to go over the offer with them after you've sent it to them in DocuSign? That's a code of ethics violation, because it clearly says in Standard of Practice 9.9-2, when assisting or enabling a client or customer in establishing a contractual relationship electronically, realtors shall make reasonable efforts to explain the nature and disclose the specific terms of the contractual relationship they're entering into.
Would a detailed message in the DocuSign email be enough?
I think so, as long as you're,
This is what this document does.
yeah,
It's about, and then let me know if you have any questions before you.
yeah. And like, that's what I have is a template. I just have like literally a guide for, guide to the contract you're getting ready to sign. and I send that to them and say, I'm getting ready to send you your contract in DocuSign. Please read this over. If you have any questions, let's talk. But, you know, for the most part, nobody ever does. They just sign it and they don't, you know, they're right. They
That's
don't.
why I like using the video.
No, that's a good idea.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, kind of a quick and easy and personal
Yeah.
way for you to kind of, you're not there in front of them, but you are there in front of them. And this is what I'm saying.
Yeah. But it is your responsibility to make sure that they understand what they're signing and not just send it to them and go, here, let me know if you have any questions. You got to give them some kind of guidance as to what they're actually signing in the terms. Okay. This is going really long. What time is it? It's 1:18. This is, yeah, this ended up going way too long. But this is a case study. So you guys read it over and this is where we'll finish. There you go. Yeah, so we'll just finish with this. It's just a case study. Let me get two for them over there.
For you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Hmm. I had a feeling you would be the one to say that.
Mhm.
What's the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can get into this.
Yeah.
I understand.
All right. How many of you think that Realtor B violated the code of ethics? Really? Now read standard of practice 16-4.
Oh, trick question, huh? Probably should have read it.
Oh, wow.
So also, you're gonna start calling all the other agents of the other companies and asking them to listen to us?
Might as well, right? No, but you know what's weird though, is in the thing, like on mine, it says what mine expires with, one time somebody else. Like when I look at my listings,
Yeah, I think you can see your own.
You're right.
but just not anything else's. Yeah, because for a while I was like, I don't think we know about listings, it's weird.
No, yeah.
Because you don't see everybody else's, right?
No, and I thought they were tracking the system.
So now what if you call that, and they're like, say you had a listing and it was about to expire, and I called you and said, hey, when's your listing expire? And then you tell me, you're like, well, it expires in a week. Then, I mean, at that point.
Then you can't. You got
Yeah,
you can't contact the client. No, because you got the information. It's just if they refuse to give you.
If they refuse to tell you,
Yeah.
you can call the guys getting the information, but if they give you the information, then you can't contact the client.
No, correct.
So it would be in Realtor
A's best
to
interest.
say, I've got this through whatever date.
That's exactly right.
So has anybody ever actually called another agent asking them when their contract was going to expire?
I have.
You have?
Hmm. They didn't tell me.
And then you call the client.
I already knew because the client had approached me.
That's why you call. It wasn't like a dry call.
But the result of this ethics complaint was the hearing panel found Realtor B not in violation of the Code of Ethics. Nope.
Probably solely because Realtor A did not refuse to discuss.
That's exactly it. So the point is, there's a cut. If you really take some time to really read the Code of Ethics, because honestly, no problem. I'll give you all my expiration dates. Actually, you have access to all of them because they're in the listing file cabinet back there. But anyway, the point is, take some time and read it. I mean, I don't care where you read it, when you read it, just take some time and read it, because you will find little things in here that you can use to your benefit and to your advantage in prospecting and in getting deals done. You really can. It's not written to, it's like the golden rule. It's written as the golden rule, right? We treat each other how we want to be treated, but it's not meant to prohibit aggressive practices in real estate. It's just meant to be fair.
I know you said it as a joke a second ago to Austin about you have access to all the files back there. Do we have access to each other's files back there within our own under our table?
They're not.
I mean, not that I would do it, but I'm just saying, I would think that would be unethical, but I guess if it's under the same.
I mean, they're not locked.
Damn right they're not.
The file cabinet's not locked.
I was asking.
I'll be honest, I've looked at listing agreements. I'm not trying to get anybody's listings, but I've looked at listing agreements in there that were not on my listings, particularly Amy's, because I'm writing an offer on her listing or whatever, and I know she's got a bunch of, old information and notes in there, and she'll say, oh, the file's in the filing cabinet, and I'll, okay.
Instead of contacting you though, just going back there and looking at that report or that contract just for the purpose of contacting your seller, like would that not be unethical?
In that case, yeah, it's sort of like a doctor using medical information on his staff. For reason like what is your need to know? Your need to know is, so why wouldn't you ask Rachel instead of pulling the file about? But if you ask her, she might tell you, and then you wouldn't have to worry about reading it. But if you don't ask her, you're not giving.
Personal contact is acceptable.
Right.
But not asking you, but just going because we're in the same brokerage, going back there and looking it up on my own.
All right. So something that you have to understand is that when all of us, we do not own our listings. Amy is the owner of our listings. We're just the designated agent that is working that listing. So we are like little cats that are all bringing mice back to Amy, right? So, I am a cat person. But really, I mean, all your listing, my listing, James' listing, they're Amy's listings. We're just the person who's the contact person. So, do we have a right to look at each other's files? I don't know. If she didn't think if she was worried about it, she'd have them under lock and key. We can ask Amy.
No,
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think it's a good idea, because if you go back there and look at any of my listings,
I was can I ask Amy, can I look at this contract? since they're hers instead of yours.
Right. No, I get what you're saying.
Carol just let you get answers.
You know, I understand what you're saying. Well, like if Amy says, oh, I don't remember, I've got the listing file in the office, then I can go to the office, get the listing file out and go, okay, well, here's where Amy took notes 2.5 years ago. No, I look for like remodeling information. I'm not like trying to call them up and go, hey, when can I get your listing? Amy won't tell me when it expires. You know, it's not like that. Yeah, same here. Literally just the paperwork. Like literally for me, my listing file just has the paperwork and that is it. Everything, I do everything paperless, so.
Amy just starts out with her folder and that's where she makes her notes. So it all stays in one place.
Yeah.
It's just all to be in one place.
Yeah, and she'll have a property that she's been working on for 10 years. That the file will be this damn thick. It's gone through 3 home inspections, and she's got every piece of paper ever from that. It's like, God. So anyway, thank you all.
No, thank you. This was wonderful. Like completely amazing.
Ended up going way too long.